Ich möchte Ihnen ganz kurz Frau Olga Goriunova vorstellen. Sie ist die zweite Medienwissenschaftlerin heute Abend, die aus London zu uns gestoßen ist. Sie lehrt am Fachbereich Media Arts an der Royal Holloway University in London. Seit 2014 beteiligt sie sich am Post-Humanities International Network. Darüber hinaus ist Frau Goriunova ständiges Mitglied des Visual Social Media Lab. In einem demnächst erscheinenden Buch will sie sich auseinandersetzen mit dem Begriff des digitalen Subjekts im Verhältnis zu Datengewinnung, Datenmustern und Datenmodellierung. In dem Vortrag heute Abend, in einem kurzen Vortrag, der auf Englisch sein wird sie sich mit der gewandelten Rolle des Gesichts im Internet beschäftigen. Das Gesicht war mal, so ist die These, wenn ich das richtig sehe, die Verbürgung von Authentizität, wird aber dadurch, dass es im Netz modellierbar ist, zu etwas ganz anderem, nämlich zu einem Objekt, das die Chance zu alternativen Identitäten bietet. Ich bin sehr gespannt auf den Vortrag und I'm very grateful that you made it from London.
Hello, good evening. I'll have to speak English because I speak no German. I have no idea what's been discussed here before, so that's very handy. I've been working recently on this idea on something that I call digital subjects, and I will just slowly lower you into this notion. I'm going to start with some examples. So, say I visit a website of a shop that sells sofas. I'm assigned a unique number that is matched with a specific product or an interest category in sofas and living room furniture. This match is already a form of a digital subject. An identifier could be an IP address, use Wi-Fi triangulation, or be a cookie. Then this matching expands from deductive to inductive. As more data is processed, correlations are found within it. These correlations are also digital subjects. Interest in sofas, together with purchasing power, geographical position, age, preference of particular products and types. So here I have a slide from what data Facebook sells, for instance, and what kind of level of detail they have and what kind of conclusions they make. This data is then turned into profiles, so models are applied to correlations in the individual data, rules, and data on others. Here, induction and abduction becomes possible. Judging by similar behaviors of other people, it is possible to infer that I might be inclined to wish for a coffee table from a specific store, or computer prediction linking a computational model and my individual data. Such profiles are also digital subjects. The long duration and consistency are gone here. The fact that I might need a reading light by the sofa will not necessarily be part of such a profile, as it is not a spy's report on my personality as a compulsive reader. All these layerings and predictions are called upon in various configurations to serve as digital subjects. These digital subjects would be always rearranged, produced in response to specific requests, and be part of a peculiar relationship between individuals whose data is processed, other data on other people, models, and evaluation of probabilities. I can be confronted with my different digital subjects at different encounters, through advertisement sold to me, a visit to a bank, a doctor, or while crossing a national border. The term subject is warranted here because these are not selves, but productions that entangle legal, physical, sensual, and cultural fields of action, and while clutching onto unique and persistent biological characteristics and judiciary subjects of actions, they claim power and enact new realities that I, in turn, then have to deal with. Key to meeting these digital subjects is to understand how they are constructed, which structures recruit them to serve specific needs, and how the power they're exerting is bestowed upon them, or the decision-making processes they serve as a part of. But equally, how do digital subjects relate back to us and subject us to specific forms of treatment? How do they prove that they are us and that they truly reflect our trajectories, inner and outer? How do they gain authority to make claims on our behalf? Claims that are supposed to be truer than the ones we can make ourselves. While individual data points can be tendentially evidential, they are not documents or evidence, and profiles even less so. It is easy to discern why the techno-scientific complex of jurisprudence would talk about information being attached to a specific identity. After all, an identifiable person can be assigned death or a prison sentence. Is there something more in this pool of mapping digital subjects onto specific humans? Data values can have some evidential relationship, but they are not absolute. Moreover, models abstracted from data, or in some cases coinciding with data, are not factual at all. Data can be actualized as pointers or witness only through meticulous work, as in the project of the, for instance, forensic architecture group. Here it requires bespoke methodologies which Eyal Weizman and his team call techniques of the interrogation of image, matter, and social data. Such techniques interpret and position data, images of a drone attack, video footage, aerial images, maps, reports, as evidence that is then supplied to International Criminal Court or high courts and commissions. So while promising extreme individualization and indeed capable of granularity, digital subjects are processes of scaling up and down in their distributedness. The momentary scale of web-based advertisement and permanent data aggregation of the Five Eyes programs pose radically different temporalities and kinds of threat, relying on some of the same sets of computational procedures, ranging from a value to other data, rules, and the model making a proposition about a profile or a proportion of the population. Digital subjects change scale. As form or identity, they become different things. So digital subjects are values, dynamically reinstantiated correlations, rules, and models. Overall, shreds of actions, identities, interests, engagements, which are put into relation to each other, disaggregated again, categorized, classified, clustered, modeled, projected onto, speculated upon, and made predictions about. These digital subjects are truly distributed and distributive. As models can be relaxed or tightened, profiles are evaluated in terms of probability. They spawn different scales, they offer different forms of proximity, complexity, forms of proposition, and frequency and type of the future. In the case of profiles, correlations in the data linked to an individual are used in a model that refers to a group of people, from which something will be inferred about the individuals whose data points might be missing altogether. Such individuals will not only not be the people whose data is crunched, but they don't need to be specific persons altogether. They might be likely nameless candidates for fitting a profile. So determination of a singular event here, like targeting a specific person, is enabled from such an operation on the multiples in which the singular things pulsate in and out of existence. And the likelihood becomes the condition under which something singular might be inferred from multiplicities, but it doesn't even have to exist or be proven right or correct. A digital subject, in fact, rarely corresponds to a classically constituted individual. It is always more and less than a human. Digital subjects aren't ever computationally aggregated into an order and composition that corresponds to the classical subject of modernity. Moreover, digital subjects do not have absolute representational correspondence to humans, subjects, or collectives. This indexicality, saying this is that, always comes from outside and always comes from elsewhere. Profiles would differ depending on requests, usefulness, and efficiency. Forms of indexicality may include the collapsing of scales, assigning sites of authenticity, and stitching together data worlds via tropes of unity and persistence. Key to such rhetoric of the digital subject that it is while distributing the subject, while distributing the subject can and does simultaneously establish it. So indexicality, this matching between data pointers and models and profiles and humans, us, looms upon us, creating individual subjects. And the consensus is that it is because modernity calls upon individuals. We receive this training from birth to be individuated into subjects, and so we naturally respond to being hailed by the algorithms. So people like Catherine Hales or Ronald Day speak about this call of modernity using the Althusserian idea that, you know, this hail, like, hey, you, trains the person from birth to be responding and to be aggregating itself into a subject. And this is the same gesture that algorithms and data infrastructure do to us. As causality in statistical models gives way to analogies, continuous measurement, and the production of set of cases in big data, the validity is established by their usefulness. So while disassembling of the regime of objectivity, characteristic of science, data analytics needs a new mode of apprehending, capturing the world, establishing the real, establishing this link of indexicality. The calculative data infrastructure needs to create its own version of mapping and generating the world, and a system of validation in which the points of connection between the world and the data can be established. Some of these points at which this capturing of the real world happens is, of course, biometric data. Biometric data is one of the sites that I assigned the status of the authentic, the real world, that acts as guarantors, linchpins on which other data abstractions can hang. Governance in terms of probability and prediction needs linchpins of the real world, and it produces them through assignation, assigning persons as terrorists, for instance. This shift to profiling and probability necessitates a grounding, a re-establishment and reaffirmation of a certain real world that must be constructed anew with these new mechanisms available and in these new frameworks. Biometrics promises to extract the truth from the body. Identification doesn't only happen through biometrics, obviously. There is IP identification, personalization, and profiling, and they all try to identify and then construct subjects and persons. But in biometrics, the body acts as the guarantor and limit of the real world. The body is always political. It always only makes sense in a particular infrastructure. So what is this new data infrastructure doing with it? So biometrics includes face geometry, iris structure, retina, hand or finger geometry, vein structure of the hand, typing cadence, shape of ear, voice, DNA, smell, and gait. How does it work? A biometric sample is described as being an analog or digital representation of a biometric feature before the process of feature extraction, which is created by a biometric data capturing device or a biometric capturing subsystem. This is the quote. The sample always includes more information that is required for identification. During what is called the process of enrollment, the user creates a sample that functions as the beginning of a process of identification. During the process, several samples are obtained. When a predefined number of samples are obtained, a characteristic template is produced from them by means of feature extraction, and then a user profile is calculated. When identification takes place, data capturing device records another sample. From this sample's necessary features are derived and classified. These features are what serves as comparison between the sample and the template. The result of the comparison is expressed as a match rate of similarity in percentages. If a given match rate is higher than that predefined by the system, the user will be successfully identified or authenticated. What is interesting is that in order to create a useful template or a profile, the system will also make use of so-called attacker data. Attacker data represents samples of other users. When such samples are used together with the data of the person being identified, the profile will clearly differentiate between an individual and others. So features can be weighed stronger or weaker depending on attacker data. So the identity here is not a sample and maybe not even the template, which is itself a result of operation of comparison on the samples with an acceptable degree of probability of error. It is some kind of a process that includes in itself a calculation of user profile in relation to other users. The assignation of the identity is then the successful matching between a sample and a template. It includes matching against otherness. Thus, identity is not about uniqueness or authenticity per se, but a non-occurrence of the same or similar enough among the measured and stored. It is an identity that works well enough in a given situation. Features in biometrics need to be universal, unique, and permanent. This universality is not an old universalism of modernity, but frequency of occurrence. Uniqueness is not old uniqueness as essence or specificity in terms of authentic subjects, but is numerical. It is a probability. And permanence here is a capacity for variation that the profile can accommodate and that is controlled by parameters. So Eduardo Glissant once wrote that identity is not about permanence but about a capacity for variation, which is in this case put under computational control in all its dynamism. The identity is a networked probability within a regime of guaranteed calculation. Through biometric data, as an example, data regime leaches onto reality in its own new way, where the capacity for variation is contained within the calculation of occurrences of distraction or noise that are managed by the tightening of the model. And this process, with its points of verification, calculated in percentages of probabilities, acts as the establishment of a referentiality of indexicality. But because it is an abstracted probability, and body, of course, is always a proxy, not a site of the authentic, it establishes authenticity at the points of successful identification. And then this real is allocated, that the real is established. So this claim, this allocation, how it is made is not really fully clear, and people who work on neural networks would tell you that it's probably the biggest question. A lot of things become aligned to make this claim, and not everything in them converges. It seems that as it is a process of establishment of probabilities, it's quite difficult to say whether anything specifically functions as a linchpin, as this absolute point of truth. But it's more that there are multiple processes that evaluate the geometry of the face, the scanning, the profiling, the comparing, that all together as relationships are quite cacophonic. So this claim is actually cacophonic and maybe doesn't always converge, but as it is not a claim of a substance, but a set of relations, processual set of patterns, its cacophony may become concealed inside other claims and logics. Thank you.